Released in 2016, Vaxxed, From Cover-Up to Catastrophe, has been a rallying call for the anti-vaccination movement. Written, produced, and directed by Angie Wakefield, a doctor who lost his medical license and was discredited by many mainstream scientific communities, it comes across as a passion project of self-redemption, as well as pushing conspiracy theories and pseudoscience. The story centers around a whistleblower at the CDC, as well as Wakefield himself. And while it neither exonerates Andrew Wakefield nor proves the corruption in the CDC, gullible people worldwide have bought into its claims. As such, this series is a long-form refutation of not only the film and its claims, but an examination into who is behind Vaxxed and why they made it. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the conclusion now of my long-form refutation of the movie Vaxxed. Now, it's been a very long road, and it's taken a long time to get here, but I want to personally thank you for sticking with me to the end. Now, our final topic tonight is going to be a little uncomfortable to talk about, but it is nonetheless incredibly important. It is one of the most distasteful and disgusting tactics employed by the anti-vaccine movement, and that is the intentional targeting of minority neighborhoods. Now, when I say targeting minority neighborhoods, that's not a metaphor. I'm not speaking figuratively. We've seen the Vaxxed team go all around the country in their big RV recording testimonials from different people, but those are people that go to the Vaxxed team, usually because of some sort of recruitment, a grassroots recruitment over the internet. No, this is something else. The first instance that I could find of the Vaxxed team targeting minority neighborhoods was back in 2010. Andrew Wakefield himself went to Minneapolis, and specifically the neighborhood of Cedar Riverside. Now, this is significant because this is the part of the city where many Somali refugee families had begun to settle. And those families were then, some of them, visited by Wakefield 3 times, usually around autism support groups. This is done in private, away from the public eye. Then, shortly thereafter, the incident rate of measles began to climb until there was a full-blown outbreak in 2017. Now, why did he go to Cedar Riverside? Why did Andrew Wakefield get involved with these families? Well, that's because some of those families noticed what they believed was an uptick in autistic children being born. Now, statistically speaking, it wasn't actually that significant. However, when you have these tight-knit communities of disenfranchised minorities, they do tend to bolster each other. And this, in a way, because of how they communicate, make them ripe for exploitation by people like Wakefield. And you'll see more of it as we go on. Now, the incident that most closely involves the Vaxxed team was when they held a screening for the movie in Compton. In attendance for this screening was Andrew Wakefield, Polly Tommy, Del Bigtree, as well as local leaders from the Christian churches and the Nation of Islam. Now, I do want to mention real quick, notable anti-vaccine legend Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has a long history of working with the Nation of Islam. How and why he got involved with them, I could do a whole video on just that, but it is suffice to say that the Nation of Islam has been under the sway of his anti-vaxxer rhetoric for a very long time. And we'll be talking a little bit more about him in just a little bit. Now, we're going to briefly shift gears here for a moment, and we're going to watch a few excerpts from that event.
It's not right. You've been harmed. You've been lied to, we've all been lied to, but I want you to know this. We have heard your story. We are here. This story is now being told. And tonight, and from here on out, you're going to be listened to, and we're going to make sure that the world hears your story.
I mean, it's pretty hard to have a more clear case of specifically targeting, like, you out there have been lied to. That's wild.
Shot in the dark to cause this to happen to my son. But you see, here's the difference. When you turn your face away from what's happening in one community, then the greedy decides that it has no respect of person, race, or nationality. And it trickles down to every other race of people. So now what we have is a Holocaust. Our children are being maimed and they're being killed. And you've got a government sitting in Washington, D.C. that doesn't think enough to subpoena Dr. Thompson, who came out and said what they were doing.
I still wonder, even now, even after I've addressed the Dr. Thompson controversy, why is it nobody's asking themselves, well, why doesn't he ever show up to any of these conventions? Nobody ever asked that.
Just 2 hours ago, I witnessed the most extraordinary unity. Sheila said to me some weeks ago, I can never imagine a Southern Baptist woman coming together with the Nation of Islam. And at the end, they prayed together. And that is unity. People coming together in a common cause against the evil.
Classic case of otherism. Amazing, amazing case of otherism. These are people who are targeting you. And you need to all come together under my truth against them. Those mean old people that kicked me out of the medical community.
What we'd like you to do is, if you can go to vaxxedthemovie.com and join our mailing list, because we're talking to congressmen and senators. We have many of them watching our film now. The staffs are watching the film. We are working on a congressional hearing to bring William Thompson forward and to start changing these laws and getting this thing out of the hands of the CDC. But we need your help. We need to be able to say we've got a congressman that's wavering. We've got someone that's about to turn. We need to be able to reach out to you and say, now's the time, now's the moment, now's when your phone call matters, now's when your letter matters. So please,
help us help you by changing your government based on our propaganda. I see no problem with this at all. Now, the next notable event tied to the anti-vaccine movement is the one that affected the Orthodox Jewish community in Rockland, New York. Now, before we touch on that, it's important to get the context. The outbreak most people are going to be familiar with is what happened in 2019. However, the Orthodox Jewish community in Brooklyn experienced an outbreak of measles in 2013. And when that happened, community leaders and rabbis alike all encouraged people to vaccinate their kids as much as possible. Now, while everybody's working together to get the inoculation rate up and the infection rate down, unfortunately, a rather loud voice screaming about our rights being taken away and the dangers of immunizations rose up, and that was Rabbi William Handler.
Children 20 years old are getting measles. Grown-ups are getting measles. And even more dangerous, babies under 1 year of age, because the mothers are not lifetime protected. They got their vaccine, and they used to give their mother's milk used to carry over the immunity to the baby, so they could give it to the baby because they had lifetime immunity in themselves. But now they only had 5 to 10 year old immunity, 5 to 10 years. Therefore, they can't help their baby, so the baby is in serious danger.
Charming fellow, isn't he? Now he, along with Peach, aka Parents Educating and Advocating for Children's Health, have been very, very vocal in those communities, spreading a bunch of misinformation. And that misinformation also bled into some of the reporting of this and also my understanding. Previously on my channel, I made the rather incorrect statement that there was a religious component, perhaps, to Orthodox Jews not vaccinating. I basically misunderstood. A lot of it because of the noise that comes from the anti-vaxxers on that side, like Rabbi William Handler, that kind of muddied up the message. Instead, I found out that Orthodox Jewish communities usually have a vaccination rate of in the mid to upper 90%. Well, if their vaccination rates are so high, why do they have outbreaks? Well, it actually ties into why anti-vaxxers target these types of communities. You see, these types of communities are very, very closely knit. They spend a lot of time together. They share in a group identity. So while you may have most of the Orthodox Jews in an area, such as Rockland, that are inoculated, that they are fully vaccinated, those that aren't, because they're in constant proximity, are more likely to share in the transmission of infectious diseases. And we also have to keep in mind, measles is not just a regular run-of-the-mill disease. Measles is more infectious than Ebola, okay? I'd like to read you a very brief excerpt from an article that I have linked down in the description. Being a religious Jew, you also get used to having a minority viewpoint, said Alexander Rappaport, the CEO of the Masbia Soup Kitchen Network in Brooklyn, and a public face of the Hasidic community. So something is not mainstream. It doesn't take you away from believing it. He also explained that some Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn go to school together, worship together, and live and travel together. This means a few unvaccinated people living in close proximity can be dangerous, but it also means making inroads with public health messages require extra effort. We see government invest in public health awareness a lot, Rappaport said, but it never trickles down to Yiddish speakers or people who don't own TV sets. Now, what does all this have to do with Vaxxed? Well, Del Bigtree showed up in Rockland, wearing a Star of David and ringing the bell of hysteria. And there he is, happily wearing a symbol of extermination, to try and compare the anti-vaccine plight to those of the exterminated, genocided Jews of World War II. And it's bizarre to me because people like Del usually tend to show up right before an outbreak, being the harbingers of pestilence, or they show up right afterwards, like in this instance, so he can have a nice, handy PR campaign. On October 19th, 2019, some of the biggest names in the anti-vax world converged into Harlem, New York for what was known as the Harlem Vaccine Forum. For over 2 hours, these anti-vaccine celebrities, as well as mothers convinced that their children were harmed by vaccines, spoke unopposed to a rather large audience.
I've brought over 500 successful legal actions in my career. Almost all of them involve some kind of scientific controversy. And if I weren't comfortable reading science, I would not be very successful in my job.
Now, this is noteworthy of an event because then 2 months later, they had the Harlem Vaccine Debate. In attendance with the Harlem Vaccine Debate was a few notable anti-vaccine YouTubers, but also Del Bigtree. And now the audience, having been previously primed 2 months prior, sided with the anti-vaxxers. In fact, the debate was even set up to try and overwhelmingly show some form of support through applause and who won, which side was being more believed by the neighborhood of Harlem. And they overwhelmingly clapped more for the anti-vaxxers. Now, why is that? Historically speaking, the African-American communities in the medical industry have not had the best relationship. This goes all the way back to when doctors would desecrate black corpses for medical study, or the Tuskegee syphilis experiments, where men were intentionally infected with syphilis and denied treatment so that they could be further studied. Now, this type of thing, it leaves a mark on certain marginalized communities when they've been abused in such a way historically, and it becomes indelibly a part of their group identity. Now, not long ago, one of the anti-vax wingnut YouTubers who was involved with the debate made the claim that casting doubt on the anti-vax beliefs of the Harlem neighborhood is racist, which is incredibly bizarre to me because you had people who were members of the Harlem community and black on the pro-science side. Let's take a look at some of those.
My name is Brother I'm a community activist, self-taught, and I care for the family.
Peace and blessings. My name is Asar Hotel, and I am a computer scientist and just a science advocate in general. I'm here on the side of science and and to defend science, to be the equalizer in this type of debate.
Now, the truth here is a little hard to navigate, especially maybe for somebody who is not part of these communities, but we're going to try and do our best. We're going to try and understand and break this down. Marginalized communities tend to share in a collective identity. This is to support, bolster, and strengthen each other. That they fall prey to the anti-vax or pseudoscience propaganda pushed by these grifters is not a mark that these communities are gullible or unintelligent. Oh no. Instead, this is a marking of how they are being intentionally and explicitly targeted by these people, by anti-vaxxers, by propagandists, who will weaponize their pain, their isolation, and their marginalization from the rest of the broader population to try and profit off of them, to try and bolster themselves into a celebrity status and be revered by these people. The problem is not the community. The community is trying to support each other. It's trying to find the best way forward. It wants only the best for its children and everybody inside of that community. No, the problem is not the community. The problem is the goddamn snakes. That's the problem. Now, lastly, I would like to touch on a topic that I've already made a larger, broader video of. In 2019, there was an outbreak of measles that hit the island nation of Samoa. Now, since that happened, 83 human beings lost their lives. Most of these were very small children or infants. Now, if you'd like to know the broader story of that, a more thorough coverage, I do have the video that I produced on that linked in the description down below. But preceding this event, the Children's Health Defense, a group run by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., began sending out information towards the government of Samoa as well as some anti-vaccine activists in Samoa when they were trying to bolster their vaccination program. They started sending out literature and propaganda. Is this actually safe? Is this actually a good idea? And hey, even Robert F. Kennedy Jr. himself went to Samoa to go and meet with some of these activists. But why? Why would he do that? What business is it of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s if the country of Samoa wants to vaccinate their children? Why did he get involved? For that matter, why is there right now, an ideological battle being waged with Western people in the blogosphere and the anti-vaccine world trying to convince people in the Democratic Republic of Congo not to get vaccinated? It's not hard to find. It's happening. It's been happening for years. And the Congo right now has over 6,000 people dead from the latest outbreak of measles, over 300,000 cases of infection. This isn't a country that is still having a problem with Ebola. And you have these people sitting in their comfortable little houses in Middle America trying to convince people in a country where people are dying in droves, thousands, that they shouldn't get vaccines. It might cause autism. But why? Why do they do this? Why is this occurring? What possibly could make people think that this is a good idea? Well, I'm going to tell you why, but the wording in this may turn some of you off. Now, I hope that if you've been sticking with me for 7 episodes so far, I've earned your trust, and you can keep an open mind about this when I'm about to use the words I'm about to use. This is about privilege and perspective. Most anti-vaccine celebrities come from affluent Western countries where they want for basically nothing. They hold positions of power and influence among hordes and droves of people that have been built up in a grassroots movement who see them as the defenders of their rights, their bodies, and their children. That's how these people perceive them. And they do this because they have no reason to fear the alternative. Where they live, usually places like the United States, they're not going to have to worry about things like a massive plague. And that's what this is. Make no mistake. We look back at the things that are happening in places like the Congo. These are like the plagues of old. Biblical times. Massive amounts of people dropping off like flies. But we have a disconnection from it, because that's over there and we're over here, and it doesn't inconvenience us. We will never understand what that is like. We don't live in a world where we need to have as many children as possible because most of them won't survive. That's not something we're going to have to deal with. But those types of places, those types of people, they do. Still. Right now. Most of us out there, most of you watching this video, will never understand and will never have to experience the fear and the agony that the people in Samoa, the people in the Democratic Republic of Congo, will have to experience watching a disease that we can prevent, cripple, and kill their children. We will never understand that. We can bear witness to it, though. We can acknowledge that it happens. And we can point out when the ideas that are influencing and causing this kind of thing begin to take hold in our communities, or places where we can have a voice, we can call that out and we can confront it. Because nobody needs to have to experience this. This is all foregone conclusion. There's no need for measles to even be on the planet anymore. We can prevent it. And never, ever forget that these people know everything that I do. They know exactly how much damage they cause. And they don't care. Now, I want to thank you all for staying with me through this long project. I looked a bit different when we started, didn't I? As some of you may know, I'm going to be taking efforts to try and also move my message, fighting disinformation and pseudoscience into the mainstream. So there will be, we'll still be doing the same thing as we usually do on this channel, looking at the latest horrific pseudoscience and horrible ways in which people accidentally mess each other up, or the latest scams. But I am also going to be putting up updates on my efforts to go into that direction. So for one last time for this series, I hope you are well. I hope your family is well. And from mine to yours, take care of yourselves. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.